The elemental world exists through the elements. The elements exist through nature. Nature exists through spirit. Spirit exists through mind. And mind exists through God himself, upon whom all heaven and nature depend. Let him be praised through the infinite cycle of ages. Amen. Salutations! Today we're going to talk about the elements. No, not those elements. These elements. Ha! I've heard of this. Those backwards idiots in ancient times used to think everything was made of these 4 kinds of matter mixed together. Come on now. If you're 12 parts in and still thinking in purely material terms, you're missing the point of this entire series. The fact is that the idea of physical elements as we define them in science would be entirely foreign to an ancient or medieval thinker. Not that they didn't have a notion of various substances. It's perfectly obvious to anyone with a brain that iron and tin are separate species of metals with their own individual properties. Different types of physical matter were traditionally referred to as minerals, or, if they're organic, as belonging to their respective organisms. Furthermore, the constellations of the zodiac are assigned to the 4 elements. Are we to suppose that Ptolemy believed the stars of Scorpio to be made of water, and those of Virgo to be made of stone? The ancient Greek word for element is arche, as in archetype, meaning first principle, while Empedocles referred to them as roots. The cardinal elements of classical thought are not just lumps of stuff sitting around mixing together in the physical world. They are ideal, universal forms that exist independent of material particulars, but which are participated in by various material expressions in ways that we can recognize as common and unified. First, we will demonstrate the previous statement beyond any reasonable doubt, after which we will consider each of the elements with respect to its nature and virtues. So, for the demonstration, I will invoke the words of Agrippa. There are then, as we have said, 4 elements, without the perfect knowledge whereof we can effect nothing in magic. Now each of them is threefold, so that the number of 4 may make up the number of 12, and by passing by the number of 7 into the number of 10, there may be a progress to the supreme unity, upon which all virtue and wonderful operation depends. Of the first order are the pure elements, which are neither compounded nor changed, nor admit of mixture, but are incorruptible, and not of which, but through which, all natural things are brought forth into act. It is the unanimous consent of the Platonists that as in the original and exemplary world, all things are in all, so also in this corporeal world, all things are in all. So also the elements are not only in these inferior bodies, but also in the heavens, in stars, in devils, in angels, and lastly in God, the maker and original example of all things. Now in these inferior bodies the elements are accompanied by much gross matter, but in the heavens the elements are with their natures and virtues, viz. After a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. Also here in the Picatrix, the wise Empedocles said that all matter perceived by the 5 bodily senses is corporeal matter, entirely composite, and when it is in this condition it is corrupted and altered, placed though lacking place. All matter that cannot be perceived by the 5 bodily senses is called simple, pure, spiritual, luminous, durable, and noble. So the elements the philosophers are referring to are something invisible, intangible, beyond time, and which cannot be divided, mixed, or sublimated, only participated in by sublunary matter. In other words, they are forms. This will become clearer as we investigate each element, beginning with fire.
Have we started the fire?
Yes, the fire rises.
Let's look at how Plato talks about fire in his Timaeus. In the next place, we have to consider that there are diverse kinds of fire. There are, for example, first, flame, and secondly, those emanations of flame which do not burn, but only give light to the eyes. Thirdly, the remains of fire, which are seen in red-hot embers after the flame has been extinguished. We can clearly see that in addition to what we commonly call fire, Plato is also talking about what we would call radiant energy. Indeed, if Plato had known about nuclear radiation, he would have certainly listed it here as a type of fire. As Plato unfortunately had no access to Geiger counters, the only types of radiation he was familiar with were that of vulgar fire and that of the sun. So elemental fire is that which is universal between these, and all other things that have a fiery nature. Such things are fire in the same way that two different, distinct objects with four equal sides are both square. Now let's take a look at something more esoteric. Here we have Iamblichus commenting on the virtue of fire. Your question betrays an ignorance concerning the offering of sacrifices by means of fire. For it is the greater power of fire to consume, destroy, and assimilate matter to itself, but not to be assimilated to matter, and fire lifts up the offering to the divine, heavenly, and immaterial fire instead of drawing it down to matter and generation. What is common between the exoteric and esoteric virtues of fire is that it transfers or transforms. In radiation, photons or other particles are transferred from the energy source to the recipient, which is energized by being illuminated, heated, or irradiated. There is also the comparable transfer of electrical currents, which certainly are a participant in fire. In combustion, the chemical energy stored in the fuel is released as heat and light, and in the process the fuel is transformed into ashes, smoke, water vapor, and the like. As you may remember from physics class, destruction is really just transformation of energy from one type to another. Mental states, which are called choleric, participate in the form of fire, being associated with energy, passion and violence, and transformative desire.
I'm in their face because I love them!
So in the theurgic example of Iamblichus, the fire that consumes the sacrifice transforms the esoteric properties within into pneumatic rays. The pneuma is then directed to the recipient by the rest of the operation. Next we will take a look at the virtues of water.
In water, chimps will drown.
For this we will look to Thomas Taylor, who we haven't spoken of in far too long. And what still farther confirms our exposition is that matter was considered by the Egyptians as a certain mire or mud. The Egyptians, says Simplicius, called matter, which they symbolically denominated water, the dregs or sediment of the first life, matter being, as it were, a certain mire or mud. Hence, when the soul falls into the sphere of the planet Saturn, which Capella compares to a river voluminous, sluggish and cold, she then first merges herself into fluctuating matter, though purer than that of a sublunary or physical nature, and of which water is an ancient and significant symbol. Besides, the sea is an emblem of purity, as is evident from the Orphic hymn to Ocean, in which the deity is called Theon Agnisma Megiston, i.e. the great purifier of the gods. So elemental water dictates the malleable, fluctuating nature of material generation, both physical and ethereal, hence why the primordial void or chaos is called an ocean. Thales of Miletus, an early pre-Socratic philosopher, also equated all matter ultimately with water. As water is malleable, readily taking the shape imposed on it, it has a placid and receptive nature. This is why it has an association with purification, as it will receive what is given to it.
I'll take your entire stock!
Part of an operation from the Picatrix relies on this understanding of water. Set yourself up over a flowing river and say, "O you running water that stands contrary to burning fire, cool the anger of such a person towards me. Remove their ill will toward me and pacify them until they love and esteem me unconditionally."
This gives you power over me?
Rivers, lakes and bogs are also used as a way of sending out a sacrifice as an alternative to fire, because the physical water takes away the physical sacrifice, while the elemental water receives the pneuma and distributes it in her fluctuating currents. With regard to the psyche, as we can see from that last quote, water is phlegmatic, presiding over placid, receptive agreeableness. But let's move on and consider the virtues of air.
Oh, oxygen.
First, Timaeus. There are similar differences in the air, of which the brightest part is called the aether, and the most turbid sort mist and darkness or smoke. Here Plato assigns aether, the intangible celestial matter, to the cardinal element of air, as well as vulgar physical gases. They share the common virtues of being expansive and permeating, filling up all available space. Like the constant flow and circulation of air in the atmosphere, the aether flows through the spheres of generation by the motive force of the anima mundi. Here we have Agrippa again. It remains that I speak of the air. This is a vital spirit passing through all beings, giving life and subsistence to all things, binding, moving and filling all things. It immediately receives into itself the influences of all celestial bodies and then communicates them to the other elements, as also to all mixed bodies. Along with transformative fire, the motive air is contemplated in the transmission of rays, hence the Greek term pneuma, literally breath, for describing quintessential prematerial energy. In the mind, the influences of air are called sanguine, which refers to blood, which if you remember from my video about sacrifice is extremely pneumatic, and are associated with dynamic motion, excessive speech and restlessness. Finally, we will speak of earth.
Welcome to Earth.
Once more, we will ask Agrippa for his opinion. Now, the basis and foundation of all the elements is earth, for it is the object, subject and receptacle of all celestial rays and influences. In it are contained the seeds and seminal virtues of all things, and wherefore it is said to be animal, vegetable and mineral. Agrippa clearly designates elemental earth as preeminently present in all kinds of physical matter, and states that it allows for the reception of the other elements by its presence. Hence it is the foundation of animal, vegetable, and mineral, i.e. what we call elements in science. Furthermore, Earth is the basis of all differentiated bodies, both physical and ethereal. In assigning shapes to the elements in Timaeus, Plato gives the other three elements different compositions of triangles, while Earth is uniquely assigned to the cube. This is physically significant with regards to the material Earth, as was recently vindicated by researchers from several universities. I have left a link in the description to a scientific article about that. But as if to fully demonstrate the perfect synchronicity of matter and form, this also has a strong metaphysical significance. Like physical metals and stones, elemental Earth possesses the virtue of steadfast and changeless stability. The perfectly regular cube is the only one of the Platonic solids in the Timaeus to extend exactly equally in 3 dimensions, in terms of volume. It is also the only Platonic solid with even-sided faces. This renders Earth supremely stable and conducive to solid manifestation. Humans participate in the nature of Earth in melancholia, which is indicative of inaction, depression, anxiety, and a strong association with the physical.
They were sitting around on their backsides doing nothing.
You may have noticed that the psychical aspects of the elements coincide with 4 of the big 5 personality traits used in modern psychology. The other, conscientiousness, belongs to intellect rather than to emotion. If you want a more in-depth look at the significance of the elements, I have left a link in the description to an article that goes into great detail on the matter, in particular how they are understood by Aristotle and their relevance in alchemy. So that's it from me regarding the elements. I hope you've come to appreciate the hidden sophistication that can underpin such a seemingly simple concept. Even the physical manifestations of the elements have a very real and innate significance to us personally, so we should all try to see past their vulgar natures and perceive them as the philosophers did. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.